So welcome everyone who is joining us on YouTube. We're here today with the Rabbi Interviews. As always, you're always welcome to join us on Zoom. I know most people watch on YouTube, but if you do have any questions and want to ask them live and almost in person to our guests, just come on to Zoom. Today we have the great pleasure of interviewing Leslie Westmoreland. So welcome, Leslie. Welcome, Ron, who's here on the call with us as well, Dr. Ron Fagan. So we have the pleasure of inviting Leslie here for one truly amazing reason. Now, of course, she's done so many amazing things we know, but she just 2.5 weeks ago, became the 4th female president in the 287-year history of our congregation, following in the footsteps of Jane Filer, Margie Levy, and Toby Hollenberg. And we're so thrilled to be able to interview her, but even more thrilled to have her on board as our new president. So what we're going to do for this session, instead of me reading a bio, is we're going to get to know her a little bit about herself, a little bit about her connection to our community, and a little bit about what she's planning to do as our president. So welcome, Leslie.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And as always, Ron, whoever's on is free to ask any questions they want. But first of all, Leslie, where are you from originally, and what brought you eventually to this beautiful city of Savannah? I say that knowing you weren't born here, so I'll leave that.
I've only been here 37 years, I think, which is nothing in the scope of things. I was born in Miami, Florida. I was raised in Miami, then I went to college in Georgia, went to University of Georgia for undergraduate, and then went back and got a master's there in education, and came here 37 years ago for a job, like so many people, and I never thought I would stay. And I fell in love with Savannah. And so 37 years later, here I am.
We're sorry, please. So you went to University of Georgia because your parents moved to Atlanta, or was that just coincidental?
You know, it was probably a little of both. I knew they were planning to move to Atlanta. They moved there during my first year in college. I also wanted to go somewhere back, back then, I don't know, when my daughter was looking for colleges, she looked everywhere. When I was looking for colleges, I kind of looked in the South. So I looked at University of Florida, where like my whole high school was going, and I think I wanted to be different. So I went to University of Georgia and loved it. University of Georgia was a great place and a fun place. Athens is wonderful. So.
Yeah, it's so hard to get in now. I hope I can get one of my kids or both of them.
Yeah, it wasn't as hard back then.
I know. I'm basically trying to figure out who I'm going to be paying off for the next couple of years. And so when everybody's paying off the last second, I'll say I started paying off 18 years ago, so I should get in for my kids. So went to Georgia. What did you study at Georgia, and what was the job that brought you to Savannah?
I've always been in education, so I got my undergraduate in elementary ed, and then I taught kindergarten outside of Atlanta in Greene County, outside of Athens for 2 years. And while I was there in Greene County working with little kindergartners, I worked with some children who had a lot of behavioral difficulties and emotional difficulties, and I was completely unprepared to work with them. And that really sparked a desire to work with kids who were having trouble. So I went back and got my master's at University of Georgia in special education with a focus on working with children with emotional behavioral disorders. And I came here to teach at the program within the Chatham County school system for emotionally disturbed children. And that's where I then stayed for the rest of my educational career as a teacher, and then as a social worker working with families, and then as an administrator. So for 35 years, I drove to the same building every day, but I did switch jobs a bunch, so it was all good.
Well, those are very different. I was also an elementary education major and taught school, but kindergarten itself is a whole different animal. I did that 1 year. It was just too much for me. But special ed is another very difficult discipline, and it really needs special people. So we know how amazing you are, and thank you for doing that. So you taught, what's the school you taught at again for 35 years? Are you part of it?
It's had a name change, but now it's Coastal Georgia Comprehensive Academy. Okay. And the program is in West Savannah, part of the school system, a little known part of it, unless you have a child who needs, their services. But we work with children with emotional behavioral disorders and also children with severe autism.
and it's so
So,
needed. And we are very fortunate to have an area, county, and a school system that really takes these issues seriously, puts professionals in place that can teach in that area. So thank you for doing that. So you moved to Savannah 30 something years ago. You find a job. It's a wonderful job. We know it's difficult. So what enticed you into becoming part of the Jewish community here? As obviously you're Jewish, but what helped you become part of the actual community itself?
well, I think my story is like so many, right? So I moved here and I went to services on the high holidays. And most any holiday that I was able to, I went home to Atlanta to my parents' synagogue and to my family. But when I couldn't, I went to Mikveh Israel. And to be honest, the people, even back then, what's the thing that sticks out about Mikveh Israel? How welcoming people were to this stranger who would walk in. You would sit down, people would say hello, they would turn around and speak to you. So you never felt alone. So that was wonderful. But to be honest, those first years that I was here, I didn't do much more than that. I met the rabbi at the time, who was rabbi here, Rabbi David. I met him through some other volunteer work and got to know him a little bit. But still, that was really the extent of my involvement with Mikveh Israel. And then fast forward a bit, and I'm married and I have a child. And all of a sudden, my child is 3, and it's time to start doing more than just celebrating holidays at home. I grew up in a house where you went to Sunday school. That wasn't a choice. That was just what happened. And I wanted the same for my child. I wanted her to have that Jewish community outside of family too. And so that's when I joined Mikveh Israel. And I think that like so many people, you have that Jewish seed that's in there, and you do some of it, but then when you have a family, you want to do more.
And Ron, did you have a question?
No, not yet. No.
Well, I was just going to say that speaking of marriage, you have a daughter that's going to be getting married soon too. So that's really a wonderful thing to have. So Rachel, who was a little girl 3 at the time when you joined the community, is now already an adult, a lawyer, prominent in the DC area. So congratulations. So,
yeah, exciting.
So how's she doing, by the way?
She's great. She's great. Thank you. I mean, it is a little challenging.
Yeah.
Planning weddings in the midst of a pandemic is a novel time to be getting married, but she and her fiance are great, and they're they're excited she's excited and he's excited too to continue their journey here at Mikveh Israel.
Yeah, so it'll be nice to have another generation born and married here. So you originally sent your child to Sunday school, or we call Shalom School. It's the combined school we have with the conservative synagogue. And so what got you involved beyond the working with my kid in Sunday school and doing the stuff there? I know you're president and the Shalom School board too at one point, but what got you hooked in?
Well, I mean, it was like, so we'd start coming, and lo and behold, I met other people with kids my daughter's age, and they were coming, and we really used to have such a great time. Especially we'd go to Friday night services, and then there was a group of us with little kids, and we'd go out to dinner. And so it was like the more you got involved, then you started coming to special activities here. And we came a lot, and we really enjoyed it. It was great. I know I've met friends who are lifelong friends that I met here, at Mikveh Israel, and it really became part of Rachel's and my family at that time, because my family didn't live here. So it really did that. And then I was asked to join the Shalom School board, and I was glad to do that and served on that from a number of years. And then I got asked to join the Mikveh Israel board and was glad to do that. And then Ruby retired as secretary. Ruby had been secretary for umpteen years, Ruby Perlman, and just such a wonderful lady Ruby was. And so I was on the board, and Ruby decided to retire as secretary. And I think they saw a person who they could get to say yes. And I agreed to be secretary. And there I was secretary for years and years. So I don't know. I think Ruby still had me on numbers of years as secretary, but that's kind of how it went. It just sort of happens, right? One thing after another, and no great plan, but there it happens.
Yeah, and again, being secretary for years is a very impressive thing to do. I know I've done it for one organization for 1 year. I'm doing it in another organization, but 1 year, 1.5 years is a lot. But to do it for many years is very difficult. And so it sounds like you had a good time on the board. What did you find that you enjoyed about working on the board and working with the synagogue beyond just the kids part of the synagogue?
Here again, it's working with people that you generally enjoy being with to help organizations that you really believe in. I have always felt that helping Mikveh Israel is wonderful because Mikveh Israel as a whole really helped me. And I've met and worked with just amazing people through doing this. So it's been an absolute pleasure always to work with Mikveh Israel in whatever capacity. We have such a diverse congregation and such interesting people that it's such fun to watch different ideas and different ways of doing things kind of meld together to make something that's amazing.
Yeah, and we really do have a nice mix of people. Some who were born here, some who moved here recently, some like you've been almost 40 years. Ron, how long have you been in town?
I've been here since 1972.
So you've been here, well, 50 years. So
Yeah,
it's a nice
yeah.
combination. So Leslie, before we get into your time as president, what are some of the highlights that you've seen during your time here as a member of this congregation?
Well, I mean,
Are you talking with me here?
I'm sorry, Leslie. Sorry, Ron. Leslie.
But then
We'll
you
interview
said
you later on.
Ron.
That's I don't have to talk. I love to listen.
But I do think one highlight, got to be you coming to join us, Rabbi. It's been, how many years have you been with us now?
I've been almost 9 years, so it's been really
that's amazing to me. Doesn't seem that long, does it, Ron?
No, it's just not.
Oh. So
amazing.
that's surely it's been a wonderful 9 years, and I think some other highlights are when we moved back into the building. We were over there at the mansion before it was the mansion, and and coming back into our renovated building and our sanctuary and our new social hall, that was pretty amazing.
And some people don't realize that our social hall is a different building. And that was only built and was completed in 2003, which is the third incarnation of that building. So a lot of people think both buildings are one. So how long were you guys out of the building when they did that renovation?
Ron, was it 1 year or 2 years?
I think it was at least a year, yeah.
It was at least a year, because I remember that we rented not the house part of the mansion, but I don't even know if the part we rented is still there, or if they tore that down to build new, but and I remember a highlight of that was truly, we'd been there for almost a year, and then I want to say Caton Smith and Ellen Bick took us on a tour of the house. Did you do that, Ron? But
I think I did,
it was their grandparents, and so that was so cool that we were able to go in, because that was the only time we were able to go into that. Here I am talking with my hands, and you really can't see that part, so I'm sorry. I'll just sit on them. But yeah, but we went into that. But that was really neat, and it was strange being out of the sanctuary and wonderful to come back into the sanctuary.
It's kind of nice. Yeah, we just talked about that coincidentally. The building was their home. It was a funeral home, and then it became the hotel. So it's interesting how things change. Was that Ellen Bick or Judy Bick?
I think it was Judy.
Was it Judy or Ellen?
Judy.
And I was thinking it was Ellen, but maybe
it was Julie.
Yeah,
I remember it was Caton. I remember it was Caton, but maybe I've got the wrong.
It was probably Peggy Bick. It was a.
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. I have no clue.
I was asking because I did not know. I could.
I remember getting toured around the building, and now I can't remember who toured us around.
All I know is we moved into the area where you're really near you, and we're close. The reason we moved there is for the Jacob G. Smith, so we'd have a wonderful public school, which is named after Caton's grandfather or great-grandfather. So So,
I didn't know that.
oh
Really?
yeah,
Is this Smith that had
yep,
no
his
clue?
grandfather or great grandfather. And so, well, you came here, you became part of the community, and obviously everybody really appreciates all you've given, so much so that you went up. Obviously, you wanted Rachel to probably grow up and go to college before you started moving up in the board. And then you now become vice president, well, treasurer first, then vice president. And how was it working with that system, which I think has been tremendous? I know this is the first synagogue you've been at as an adult, I think, if you've been here 37 years. So you don't realize not every synagogue has the smooth transition that we have. Other places, they're searching for presidents at the last minute, or they're trying to maneuver. But here, how does it work here?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's been wonderful because you come on the executive board, as I did as secretary, but then when you become treasurer, then, if you're willing, and then you become vice president, and then you become president. Ooh, that's a scary sound. But it allows you to work under different people and see everybody, everybody does it a bit different. And I just really think everybody is the right president, hopefully for the right time. Charles Harris did an amazing job steering us through closing down the synagogue and how we get up with services and I mean, what a challenging time that was. But I also, was on the board during other challenging times and transitions and got to see John and, be president. I just see his name on there. Toby, Brian, boy, now you can see how long I was secretary. But, everybody does it a bit differently, but does it so wonderfully that, that you get to model all those. So it's not quite as scary as I think it would be if you not, seen what comes before.
Yeah, and I think it's a wonderful tradition because you've basically been on the executive board knowing you will be president for 4 years before you even get there. So you've had 4 years to see how the finances work, to work with at least 2 or 3 different other individuals. So it's really a nice way that's been done here. So I think one of the reasons we've been so successful is because we've had strong leadership since the day we got off the boat in 1733, and it's pretty much continued. And during times like a civil war or a pandemic or depression, the leadership has really had to step up and make sure that the congregation runs smoothly. And obviously this is one of those times, unfortunately, but we're fortunate to have such strong leadership. So now that you've started, I mean, really, for those of you who don't know, we just became president like 2 weeks ago because a new president starts their term at the very end of January. So we're now February 16th. So as our new president, what are some of the things that you look forward to doing in our congregation in the future?
Well, I mean, I think really number one is looking at how we reopen somewhat. Our congregation, as I said before, it's made up of people with, what makes it so strong is that we have people of different needs and different worship styles, and the same is kind of with as we look towards opening up. We have some members who are ready for us to open up in a safe, limited way. We have some members who aren't ready. So, it's going to be, how do we meet everybody's needs? We've done such a great job with our technology that piece surely won't be ending. I think that's, if there's any silver lining to what's been going on, it's the fact that now people who aren't able to come to synagogue, even when it's opened, can take part in services. So that's something we surely don't want to lose. But how do we start opening up? So we're working on that. We're working, with people in our community with medical expertise and scientific expertise, as well as Rabbi, I know you're hooked in with the city and the guidelines from them. And so how do we reopen in the limitations of our sanctuary, being sure that we have the appropriate distance and the appropriate safeguards in place to keep everybody safe? And I think that's the big challenge for right now. The other big challenge is how we navigate things financially. That's a little easier right now because we through the great work of Debbie Owens, and of course, Jennifer too, Jennifer Rich, we've been able to navigate the PPP loan process. So that helps because we've been very proud of the fact that even when we weren't open for all that time, our staff didn't miss a paycheck. So, that's been very important to us, to keep our staff as wonderful and to keep them going and to keep things going. So, how we navigate financially, how we get reopened, and how we meet everybody's needs. We're not going to meet everybody's needs all the time, but how do we meet everybody's needs enough so that everybody feels a part and is a part of our wonderful congregation?
Yeah, I think the technology is a great point. I look at now, when my checking if my daughter has a fever, I just take the mechanism. I don't even touch her anymore. I went to this other thing and had it checked, and I looked at a computer screen, and the computer screen told me if I had a fever or not just by looking at it. So
Wow.
This new technology, and when you actually have to have it done, when you do it. And so when it comes to, we talked about online services, and now we do it. Now we know how to do it. We talked about making sure anybody could pay stuff online. Now we talked about putting our museum online. Now it's there. Talked about a YouTube page. Now we have one. So unfortunately, we've done all these things because we've had to, but you're right. When the need arises, you step up to the challenge. So that is an important thing that we will, looks like, have virtual services even when we go back into the synagogue. And so knowing these, what are some other challenges you think we face beyond the pandemic, or what are you looking forward to doing, hopefully, when it's over?
Well, just as a way of greeting everybody back and getting together again. I know, when we had the service outside for Sukkot, and there was there was a wonderful box lunch that everybody purchased. But, and I guess the plan initially was for people to sit in their cars and do services and eat their box lunch. Nobody did that. Everybody took their box lunch to go, because what did people want to do? What had people been missing? They've been missing the face-to-face. So nobody wanted to take their mask down. Everybody wanted to be outside, safely distanced, but seeing people. So I can't wait till we can all worship together, learn together, celebrate together. We can get all that going. And then I think it's just, we're in such a good place as a synagogue now. How do we keep it going? How do we innovate and try new things without losing the things that make us wonderful? The thing I've realized is that for every idea you try that has you changing something, somebody is very excited, and somebody thinks you are changing the thing they love most about that particular event or service. So it's how you do that balancing act to keep enough the same, but we have new people coming in all the time, bringing with them traditions from their congregations and their past lives. How do you meld all that together and keep us moving forward?
That's a good point. And before we continue, Ron or John, do you guys have any questions? We'll make sure you guys have the opportunity to ask any questions.
Well, my point is that seeing what's going on in Israel, it looks pretty optimistic that we're going to get someplace with this. At one point, it was just a point at the end of the tunnel. Now it's a little bit of light down there. They've been very successful with the vaccination, and once again, it seems like the vaccination is the key, and people will feel more confident after that.
Yeah, we had Moti Locker on. I interviewed him a couple of months ago. He's the executive director of the AA, the Conservative Synagogue, and he's from Israel. And he was telling me that his mother got a call at 2 or 3 in the morning and said, "Come on in, get your shot," out of the blue. She didn't know it was her turn or anything. She just got a call. 2 or 3 in the morning, she says, "Great." And she goes in and she leaves. And then it's like they're doing it 24/7 there. So that's how they did it so quickly. John, did you have a question?
Well, I'm excited about all the things that are going on. I haven't spoken to Leslie since she's taken on the mantle, and I want to thank you for doing that. And I know you're going to do an absolutely great job for us. One of the things I'd like to see us do particularly, and it's sort of a segue from what Ron just said, Cindy and I, for instance, have been blessed. We've both received our second doses already. And I'm hoping that by sometime in April, we will be able to come back to a masked, socially distant service in the sanctuary, where we have figured out how to let people that are willing to wear a mask, be socially distanced, have had both doses, come for services.
And you know what?
And do that by maybe signing up ahead of time, and maybe it's 30 to 35 people. One of the bad things we're going to have to confront is the fact that families, because children can't be vaccinated at this point, probably are not going to have to be welcome within the sanctuary yet. But we'll need more data on how we can bring them in. But I'd like to see us move towards that on Saturday morning services.
Well, John, I think you're absolutely right. And our plan is surely to, by mid-April, to have had a service in the sanctuary. We're going to start small. We've been in there measuring and looking at how we can seat people. I mean, the vaccine, I think people who've had the vaccine are probably going to be more likely to want to come back. I don't know about requiring that. Of course, masking completely will be required. If you're not willing to do, there'll be no exceptions for that. Even if for whatever reason you can't mask, then you have to watch on video. But we've been in there measuring and looking at how we seat people. We're a little challenged because our pews are fixed, but we can get a significant number of people in there, socially distanced, 6 feet or more apart in every single direction. And you're right, it really is almost not looking at the number, a specific number, but looking at the units, because you and Cindy are really a unit. You guys can sit together. But if I was on the same pew with you, we need to have that 6 feet, so it's going to be very much about making reservations. It's going to be very much about when they take the reservation, not only do they take your reservation, but they block you into a certain pew and a certain spot, so that we're working through all that. And we really have gotten going on that as more people, before I think we were so hesitant because so much of our population age-wise was in the higher risk category. But now, a lot of us are getting vaccinated and will be by April. So the plan very much is to start small. It may be, I know you may have to wait a minute for the Saturday morning, because I think just as we look at it, we think we can start the first 1 or 2 better on Friday night with the smaller numbers. And because we have that Saturday morning service, so what's the word I want? It's so people are so used to that and using that. So we thought maybe the thought right now is, but of course we want everyone's input, is maybe just start with Friday night because we have a little more room to wiggle with that, and then move to Saturday morning. But we very much want to, move the process along to get to that, knowing that it's not going to be for everybody, and that's okay. We're not going to dial back on what we do electronically either.
And I want everyone to know that John was not a plant asking that question. That just came out of the blue 100%. Sorry, John, I interrupted.
Well, I think that what you're describing is how we look to go forward makes a lot of sense. I do think we need to continue services like we are showing them now. I mean, I know that unfortunately the rabbi may have to go back to work on a Saturday morning, but I think he realizes that's part of the job description. But because I don't think we can leave that again. I think the fact that we make services available to our entire community makes a big difference. And then the only other thing I'd probably add from a restriction standpoint is I think you have to be a member. So
that makes perfect sense, because also we're going to have an issue. You don't know. I think a lot of people are going to want to come back. And so we surely need to get our members into the sanctuary, and we have a little more control there and knowledge. Then you're right. Then it's not going to be somebody able to walk in off the street. For sure not. So, but it's exciting. I'm excited at the thought that we get to, come back at some point. And there's going to be bumps, and we're going to have to work them out as we go.
I mean, and it may be a hybrid service, because I don't know if the rabbi has been able to get shots for himself, but I mean, the last thing we want to do is get him sick.
Well, and I think that's a great point, John, and talking to Leslie. It's not just about becoming a hybrid, meaning let's have services in the sanctuary. Because we don't have a $250,000 studio in there. We have to figure out how can we do a live service with people participating with music, because if you're doing it live, you do music a lot different than it's being recorded. So right now we're using recorded music on Saturday morning, but when we go to live music, how do you make sure the live music is heard as well as the recorded music? That's what we're gonna have to work on. So that's a good question.
It may be that you play tapes or recorded music even during, quote, the live service on a Saturday.
And that's very likely because of the singing and the music and because of the sound system. And that'll be Leslie and Jason and everybody else talking to see what the best technology is going to be. Thanks those are great questions, as always. For those of you who don't know, John was president here. This is the John she mentioned who was president.
But it's going to be one way in April, and then hopefully it's a better way in July. You know what I mean? That is, hopefully we keep moving forward, but we've got to start somewhere. We've got to start somewhere. So, I mean, I think I maybe even said, I forget what I've said to you, Rabbi, when we were just talking now, but we were there, with a tape measure yesterday and measuring, off and looking, and it's gonna take everyone's cooperation, but everyone has cooperated so well with everything we've had to do so far that I don't see that being a problem. I think everyone's going to be so glad that, they'll bear with us on whatever rules and restrictions we had to have in place.
And I know it's tough to be in the position you're in, Leslie, not only because you're president of this wonderful synagogue, but because a little bit of what you're going to be doing was set before you arrived, because obviously you started during the pandemic. So we know that's going to take quite a bit of focus. Beyond the pandemic, let's say miraculously September, October, after holidays, we're fairly back to normal. What are some things you'd like to see in our community in the future beyond the pandemic?
Well, I mean, I'd just like to see how we can engage everybody, especially, well, I don't even want to say especially, I want to say everybody, because I want to be sure that we're balancing programming so that we're bringing in our families and our kids. We're also bringing in our people of retirement age, and also our people in the middle, empty nesters, and so that we're having programming that entices everybody, but also that we're having programming that brings them all together at the same place. Because I just think, you asked me so many questions, Rabbi, about my journey and my daughter's journey with me as we came up through synagogue life here. And I think one thing that was really wonderful for her was meeting people of all ages. It's not that everything she went to, she only talked to other people with families but she saw older people too and saw them as part of synagogue life. And I think, I'd like to see sometimes around here before, when we were able to come to things, if it mentioned children or families, that kind of meant certain parts of our population didn't come, and I want us to work on having programming that's multi-generational. I guess that's the best way to say it, so that our whole community has some activities that are happening together, while we're also programming for some things that are really enticing to each different group.
That's a great way of saying it. Yeah, I think that would be an amazing thing to focus in on. For those of you who don't realize, our community is built on a lot of people who move here from out of town. We have a lot of people retired to Savannah, but in the recent years, we've had a lot of kids born, 0 to 4, like 10 times the number of the previous 4 years, and that is not an exaggeration. So how Leslie decides to mix all of these kids and all of these people who move here for retirees with everyone else is going to be really interesting to see how that goes.
But the wonderful thing, it's not how Leslie decides, it's how you decide, Rabbi, and the Public Worship Committee decides, and the History and Heritage Committee decides, and how we all decide through our committee work, through our board work, through our past presidents, getting everybody's input, because if we get everybody's input, then people are more likely to come. You're more likely to come and be a part of something if you've had a part in planning and a part in your ideas being heard.
Excellent. Any other questions? And also, I just want to make sure you know that in 2 years you will be in the most enviable position of all, and that, of course, is past president. Immediate past president. Some places, immediate past president stays on the board for 2 years, but here, since they've been, through the process for 6 years, they don't stay on the board. So it'll be interesting. So my last question for you, and just coincidental, John was here. What do you do now as president to work with people who have been in leadership positions before?
Well, the first thing I do is make sure that they'll still receive my phone calls. So I called Toby even before, as we were just looking at things. And at one point I said to her, I was like, I hope by the end of this 2 years, you don't run when you see my phone number pop up on your screen. But, that's one of the wonderful things about McBisrel is that, when John finished his term, he stayed on to see the work in the social and the sanctuary done. How long did that last, John? Like a couple of years, right? I mean, he was beyond involved. Charles is come off, but Charles has agreed, with his expertise medically and all, to really stay on and help with our reopening through this. So, I mean, the fact that when presidents finish, look at Toby. I mean, she has her hand in everything. Baba has called to say he'll help me in any way. I mean, I've talked to Joel about MEF stuff. He agreed he would not stop taking my phone calls. So, the fact that, Lord, I lost my train of thought, but I just want, when I'm finished in like 23 months, who's counting, I finished my first successful board meeting and I was like, okay, 1 down, 23 to go. That's not so bad. I want to, I'll be glad to stay active and help the congregation in any way I can, just like everybody who I've worked with has done.
You can be a sage.
Pardon?
You can be a sage in 23 months.
Yeah. She will. That's a better name for past president. Sage. Israel Sage. We got one on here.
Yeah, you got a sage right now. Yeah.
Scary, pretty scary.
Well, I think you made a good point, and we have an incredible number of past presidents, past board members who stay involved, and you see throughout the year. Well, you used to see in person, but who knows? Maybe one day you will even have the opportunity to have a board meeting in person. That would be pretty impressive. Nice. Yes. And so, nice. As always, we are so privileged to have wonderful people in our community. Thank you to Leslie for coming on. Thank you to Ron and to John for asking questions. Again, if anybody has any ideas on who they'd like to see me interview, just let me know. We're filled through, I think, February and part of March. Next week, we're going to be interviewing Susie. Did the right? Susie. For those who don't know, that is Kelly's daughter, who is a wonderful young woman. She's just turned 18, I think, and she's already been given a contract to start as a Broadway recording artist. And she's written a couple of Broadway shows. They're going to be produced already, obviously, after the pandemic, which is really incredible because she's only 18. So it's a unique situation. So she has agreed to come on, and we'll interview her next week, and she's an absolute delight. So thank you again, Leslie. If anybody has any questions, just please email her or call her, and she's always happy to help out. And we look forward to seeing you later. And again, everyone stay safe. Thank you to Ron. Thank you to John. And we will see you next week. Thanks, Leslie. Keep up the great work.
You guys.
Well,
Everybody
stay
have
safe.
Bye-bye. We'll